Season 2 of the One Piece live action comes out in just a few days, and with that, I thought it'd be fun to reminisce about what has to be the worst adaptation of this franchise. I know I already made a video 3 million years ago talking about the 4Kids adaptation of One Piece, but screw it. As an anime character, and someone who's watched all 104 episodes that were produced, I still have a lot more to talk about. Now, if you're watching this, I imagine I don't need to explain the premise of the best-selling manga of all time, but I should start by talking about the premise of the company that was initially responsible for localizing its anime. As the name implies, they were responsible for making stuff for kids. The company had a partnership with Nintendo at the time to help market their products to a Western audience, and in 1998, after acquiring the rights to Pokemon, they realized there was a lot of money that could be made from catering towards this demographic. Despite not having jobs, children made them money. And since they already had the licensing rights to Pokemon, they got first dibs on the ability to air the show in the US. Thus, 4Kids TV was born, and after releasing their English dub of Pokemon, they became the first dubbing company responsible for the English localization of shows. However, it's important to note that 4Kids dubs weren't usually regarded as amazing, as many of their edits include changes to dialogue or complete re-edits of scenes.
These donuts are great! Jelly-filled are my favorite! Nothing beats a jelly-filled donut!
Nevertheless, it was a fucking success. Obviously, we're talking about Pokemon, and as a result, they adopted a new business model of acquiring shows from other countries, mainly Japan, and dubbing them for their target audience, that being children. The problem with that, however, is that the properties they acquired could range anywhere on the spectrum. Granted, this was during the late 90s, early 2000s, so it's not like they could acquire the rights to High School DD, but some of the shows they acquired definitely leaned towards a more mature demographic. Not to mention, they also had some impressive licensing deals with networks on where and when they could air these shows. So if you were ever watching Nickelodeon at the time, and all of a sudden an episode of Dragon Ball Z began to play, now you know why. But they were still going strong at the time, and had no intentions of slowing down. However, they would soon become victims of their own hubris when they made the fatal mistake of acquiring the licensing rights to what is now their most infamous property to date.
4 adventurers in search of their dreams. Wealth.
It's mine! All this gold is mine!
Fame.
All I want is to be the greatest swordsman in the world.
Fortune.
I'm gonna find One Piece!
And... we'll get back to you. Sure, they're dreaming. Got a problem with that? One Piece. Only on 4Kids TV.
One Piece easily stood out as not only 4Kids' worst dub, but one of the worst anime dubs of all time. To say it failed is an understatement. This show flopped harder than my cock on your mother's chin. This drastic decision begged the question, why? Why the fuck would you make this? It's not like they were short on children's properties they could acquire, and they could have easily dubbed this properly to branch out to a wider audience. I guess they thought that since it was an animated program, that automatically meant it was intended for kids. Problem with that, however, is that while One Piece is not considered an adult animation in Japan, it's very much intended for a more mature audience than the rest of the 4Kids catalog. Everyone has different opinions on what's suitable for children, which is why we have things like the FCC in America to help monitor what's being broadcast. But the changes 4Kids made for One Piece to meet these guidelines were not only horrendous, but excessive. Like, I can legally butt-chuck Budweiser, and I still get PTSD from when I watched this.
So tell me, does he give you nice doggy biscuits when he wants you to play fetch?
And you, all bark, no bite.
Woof, woof, woof.
You're not funny.
Oh god, I need an alcohol. It's also important to note that this was during a time when parents were more involved in raising their kids, not like today where they just hand them an iPad and don't monitor what they're doing online. With 4Kids' target demographic being ages 7 to 11, That meant you couldn't just broadcast scenes like this and not expect some kind of reaction from the parents. Which, again, begs the question, why even make this? There were over 200 episodes in Japan when they made the announcement. They should have known the show was going to have moments like this. Now, I don't just want to regurgitate the same complaints from my first video when it comes to the changes they made and overall censorship of the show. So, to summarize the bulk of it, smoking, blood, and alcohol were censored, guns were removed or modified to be filled with water, some characters had their names changed, and the concept of death doesn't exist. Depending on the severity of the changes that were made, they would either minimize the stakes at hand or completely alter the original story.
No problem. It's you I'll hurt. Now get up, you lousy human. How about a nice room in a dungeon for the rest of your days?
Even outside the excessive censorship, there were a lot of creative decisions that were questionable, to say the least. For example, what the fuck is that? This shit looks like they screwed up trying to make a sex toy. And don't even get me started on the dialogue.
One more punch and say goodbye to your friend! Now pummel his head flatter than the shape of the earth!
Mr. Helmeppo!
Not only does Helmeppo not understand basic geophysics, but apparently he doesn't even know what fucking planet he's on. Yeah, a lot of the dialogue was very cringe. In fact, most of the dialogue was cringe. It's not just because of bad writing, but also because they made some terrible creative changes in regards to some of the characters, such as giving them accents. For example, this is how Sanji talks in the 4Kids dub.
It's ungentlemanly to raise a hand against a lady. Buy those boy brains!
Yeah, I have no fucking clue what he just said. Apparently, he was supposed to have a Brooklyn accent, which means the people at 4Kids have never been to Brooklyn. They also changed his attacks from French cuisine to food-based puns. I'm not going to play any of those clips because it's actually inaudible. But from what I could make out, some of his signature attacks include barbecue rib buster and shish kebab back smash. It sucks. Like, I don't know what beef they had with Sanji over at 4Kids, but what they did to this man was irreparable. And it wasn't just Sanji who had a jarring accent. Look at what they did to Best Girl Robin.
Don't get your feathers ruffled, birdie boy. It was just business. Nothing more, nothing less.
Don't get me wrong, I like a nice southern girl as much as the next guy, but this... I mean, at least you can make out she was supposed to have a southern accent. Also, I don't know if I talked about this in my original video, but you probably caught a glimpse of it there. They completely censored cleavage. Obviously, kids don't know what breasts are. It's not like any of them have ever suckled their mother's bosoms. I don't even want to imagine what would have happened if 4Kids still existed today. They'd probably uninstall Life if they were tasked with editing the female characters post-time skip. Another important thing to note is the continuity errors as a result of their edits. One of the most infamous examples of this is how they completely skipped Reversed Mountain by replacing Laboon with an iceberg.
We're gonna crash!
So much for that iceberg!
Luckily though, the 4Kids dub never made it to Thriller Bark. Otherwise, I don't know how or if Brook would even be included in this adaptation. What I do know is that by them making the inexplicable decision to remove the Little Garden arc in the 4Kids adaptation, they completely changed the storyline leading up to Alabasta. You see, right after that arc, Nami gets sick from the island, thus resulting in the Straw Hats taking a detour to Drum Island, where they would then recruit the ship's doctor, Chopper. Not to mention, Little Garden is where they first encounter Mr. 3, but now he's just this random character in the 4Kids dub who shows up in Alabasta just to tell Crocodile he's been following the Straw Hats since Logtown. However, they don't meet Baroque Works until they enter the Grand Line, so how the fuck could he have been following them since Logtown when he didn't know who they were until after they had entered the Grand Line. Not to mention they had to do a ton of ass pulls in order to make the narrative suitable for kids. A great example of this is during Arlong Park, where Nami has to prove her loyalty to the Fishman Pirates. In the original version, Nami is ordered to stab Usopp in order to prove her loyalty to the crew. Nami, of course, is not loyal to Arlong, so she has Usopp let off a smoke bomb before stabbing her own hand, making it seem like she stabbed Usopp, but in reality, he's safe. It's a very effective scene in the original version, and an unexpected demonstration of her resolve. However, since we've established 4Kids doesn't allow blood, violence, or death, how did they go about executing this scene? Well, let's take a look.
Time for my smoke star!
Uso, give me more smoke cover and let me have your rubber knife. Now!
Hey, Nami, just please don't hurt me!
This'll save my plan.
Knife's in this pouch!
Got the knife. Now follow my lead. Remember, it's your rubber knife.
Better be!
Don't overdo it. Now fall in the water.
A rubber knife. Where the hell did that even come from? You see what I mean? A lot of the things that happened in the 4Kids dub happened solely because the plot called for it, and they needed to stray away from the source material. There was no foreshadowing or even acknowledgement that Usopp had this in his arsenal. I don't even know what the purpose that item would serve other than during this very convenient plot point. It can't cut shit, and if you needed a good insulator for electricity, you have an entire captain that's made of the stuff. It is objectively hilarious what 4Kids did to One Piece. Even outside the actual contents of the show, the way at which they presented One Piece was a detriment, as people who weren't familiar with the source material quickly wrote it off as just this silly little show that shouldn't be taken seriously. For example, did you know they had One Piece sweepstakes?
Just by participating, you'll unlock the One Piece online treasure chest and find a bounty of exclusive One Piece downloadable goodies, including wallpapers, screensavers, and cool buddy icons.
Stay tuned for the One Piece Secrets of the Seas Trivia Challenge all morning long.
And don't even get me started on Secrets of the Sea, which was part of their series of downright sinful trivia games they had for their shows.
Hey everybody, I'm Luffy, the captain of the merry-go. And what would a captain be without his lucky hat? So why don't you try stretching your noggin around this one?
Who gave Luffy his lucky straw hat? Was it Usopp, Shanks, or Sonic?
Even some of the things that were considered better in hindsight did irreparable damage, not just to One Piece, but to the entire genre of anime. Ever wondered what happened to having an English dub opening for an anime? Well, let's take a look at the opening that premiered on its death date.
Yo!
Don't give it up, Luffy! Don't give it up, Zolo! Don't give it up, Nami! Don't give it up, give it up, give it up, give it up, give it up!
Like, I don't think the opening was terrible, all things considered. I just didn't think it was necessary. It also came at the cost of losing We Are, which is just an affront to God. Again, you can correlate this opening to the sudden downfall of having these English dub openings in anime, and with this being the first One Piece dub, it undoubtedly had a lasting negative impact on not just this franchise, but to the entire genre of anime. And to me, that's the real reason why 4Kids One Piece is still hated to this day. It stunted an entire genre of content that was growing in popularity amongst all ages, and divided the community as a result. Anime only versus manga readers? It's because of 4Kids. The sub versus dub wars? 4 kids. Your parents got a divorce? It's because of 4 kids! Now, One Piece and anime would slowly recover in 2007 after 4 kids failed to renew their licensing in 2004, which allowed Funimation to acquire and redub One Piece and eventually gain the rights to all of their anime properties. And when I say redub, I mean they finally gave us a well-acted, unedited version of One Piece. Like, even if you're not a dub watcher, you can still recognize this is very good.
This is the greatest thing I have ever seen in my life! Out of everything that's on the internet, this is the best thing that has ever existed. Oh yeah, oh, mwah. The subtle lines, the shading, the just enigmatic nature of it all of this is just, it's perfect.
Now, I tried to find any information as to how 4 kids managed to acquire this beloved property in the first place, or more importantly, what the hell possessed them to dub it, and the only information I could find comes from an interview the Anime News Network had with the Senior Vice President of Digital Media at 4Kids back in 2010. It's pretty long, but to summarize, Mark Kirk revealed that it was most likely because of a lack of internal research after acquiring One Piece in a package deal. Granted, he also states this was before his time working at the company, but in a nutshell, what this means is that 4 kids bought One Piece on a whim because the show had good ratings in Japan and it came packaged with certain creative elements. And how they decided to use those creative elements fundamentally killed the company. So much so that if you look up 4Kids TV today, you'll get taken to a GoDaddy parking page. That is an obituary if I've ever seen one. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about this because it's always a fascinating case study to look back on, and I think it serves as a good lesson about becoming victims of your own hubris. It's still amazing to me that One Piece managed to survive this whole ordeal, and hopefully Netflix will take note of this as their adaptation of the franchise continues to grow in popularity. And if you don't want to end up like 4Kids, make sure you tip your bartenders and go to church. That's really about it. See ya.